All right, so let's continue creating the finite state machine for our player. In order for us to do this, we're really going to have to be able to start seeing something for our player. So for right now, we have our dynamic creature that is displaying when we call the display for the dynamic creature. So we need to go into our sketch. And right now we have our player.update. We want to do our player.display. Okay, there it is. All right, so let's start thinking about things that we would need for doing this. Because now we have a player, we can start implementing some states and inheriting from the state machine state. So as long as we are doing a enter and exit handle and update, we can start building some stuff. So let's start looking at that. Let's go ahead and create another file, and let's just call this run state. And actually, before we get deep into this, let's create a folder to keep organized. So let's call it player states. Okay, now this is going to end up having all of our player states. That way we can have enemy states, player states, and do all kinds of stuff like that. So let's go ahead and create a file here, and we'll call it run state.js. Okay, now this I'm going to have to add, and I have to properly tell where it is. So we have to have the state before we create a run state because it's inheriting from it, but that would be something that we could pass to our FSM. So let's do, now I can't just say state.js, I have to call the proper folder, so player states / run state.js. Okay, and then in here, class run state extends state. Okay, now we got to call our constructor. And for these states, we're not really passing in. We could technically pass in, but when we're calling our stuff, we got to end up having that. The update, the handle input, all of that stuff needs to be standard for it to work. So for right now, we will just leave it, but we could end up having for, say, specific enemy classes, we might pass certain values. Since I'm doing this for my player, I can actually just write some of these in and just start standardizing it. So let's say for my run state, we have our player speed. So let's look at our player, see if we have that in. Where is my player? I've not created the player yet, but we have the speed that we're passing in. That's something that we're going to want to touch. All right, so we have I don't think we need really anything on our constructor yet, other than we are passing the subject. We are passing if it's poppable. So this is super, and I'm passing in that, so it would be passing in the subject and the poppable. Okay. Right now I don't have anything for my run state, but if I did have some specific values, so this could be different things that I would do. If I start having hitboxes, I can have those get managed for the positioning of those. I can set my animations, all of that stuff. So we do have an enter state, And for right now, we can just do console.log run state enter. Exit console.log. And doing this just helps make sure that we have the correct ones running. Run state dot exit handle input. Okay, so when I am running, this is when I want to implement some stuff. So I want to deal with if we are running, I want to be able to, say, take spacebar for having my player jump. Yeah, so that'd be key code equals 32. If that is pushed, then we are returning a new jump state. And then we can pass in our subject. So this run state's going to hold it. So I'm going to be passing in this dot subject. And this is poppable. So because when I return from my jump state, I can go back to my run state. So true, it is poppable. And now we need to have our update. Okay. And if I needed any other specific functions, I could build them in here. If it's something that I'm going to use for everything, then I might want to move it. So right here, this would be my transition from going from a run state to a jump state. So we do want to create another one. So we're going to create another file. And we're going to do a jump state .js. There we go. Now we need to implement this. So I'm going to copy the run state from here and then just paste. Jump state. Okay. Now when I'm in my jump state, there are different things that's going to matter. Okay. We have gravity on this one. So jump state extends state constructor needs a subject, and it needs, if it's poppable, so this dot subject is subject. Oh, that was dumb. I need to call it the super subject and poppable. All right, but we do need some stuff on here. So jump state, we care about gravity. So let's say this dot gravity is create vector, and we move 0 in the x direction, and we want to move +2. We're putting gravity here, not on the run. The run, we don't care about that. We only care about the jump state. Okay, so here's the gravity. We already have velocity for our player. So we can access that when we create our player. He has velocity through the dynamic creature. So we can still access that. We have gravity. We do have an add force here, but I'm seeing if anything else I want to do. All right, let's build the other ones. So we'll have enter console.log. Computer's kind of freezing up. enter. Exit. Console.log. Jump state. Exit. Handle input. This I'm going to want to end up doing something for my handle input, and I'm also going to end up having to update. Okay, so before when we had our player, when we pushed the space bar, we had that move function, and then we were updating and testing if he was on ground and doing those things, adding that double jump. That is going to actually be a part of this, that we're only able to jump if we're in the run state right now. So this will kind of get rid of double jump. But we do want to kind of identify, do we want the add force in a jump state? Because that add force might be something that we could use to do as like a pushback, say on an enemy. I might actually want that to be part of the dynamic creature. So I'm going to go ahead and move this here because I think we would have more application for it having it here. So we're going to add our simple physics engine, add force, and we're adding that force. The force is going to be so let acceleration is the force, and then we need to access the subject. Okay, so the subject is the one that's going to hold the velocity, and that's ultimately what we're changing and accessing the position. Okay, so the dynamic creature, it's going to be this dot position and this dot velocity that we're using. So this dot velocity dot add, we add that acceleration. This dot position dot add, we're going to add that velocity. Okay, so that would set it up. So now if we jump, we are accessing the subject of this jump state. So we're assuming that that is probably going to be the player, but it could be anybody that has this jump state. So we want to, as soon as we enter the jump, what are we going to do? We're going to add that initial force. So that is that jump strength, which we haven't added yet. So I'm kind of doing this in pieces so that we understand how we're kind of refactoring. So we need that jump strength. Now that could be built from the subject if it's something that we're passing in. So let's look at the dynamic creature and see if that was something that we added. Because they may have no jump strength and not be able to jump at all. The dynamic creature, it has a max health. Again, I could extend from this dynamic creature and have a player which would have jump strength. Okay, so we're just slowly pulling all of this out to get what we want. Ultimately, I think that I'm not going to have, I'm thinking I only want my player to jump, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead and give it in the jump state a specific amount. But if I decide that I want my enemies to also be able to jump, then I am going to add the jump strength in the dynamic creature part. So I'll just give it some value. So let's say I'm doing -20. Now this is going to be a vector. So I can't do create vector like this. I have to have my x and y. So I'm going 0 in the x, but I am going up. So -20. Now, when I enter my jump state, that is when I'm applying. So I'm going into my jump state. I need to apply that impulse. So this dot subject dot add force, and I'm going to add this dot jump strength. That's the initial thing that I do in my jump. Okay. When I'm updating, I'm going to be adding my gravity. So this dot subject dot add force, this dot gravity. Okay. Now, in this case, I'm just doing a jump. So what I want is gravity to apply until I have reached the bottom. So what we did with our original player is we were checking the bottom values. That's something that I could do as part of the dynamic creature. I could do all kinds of stuff. So as I'm getting to where I need to be on my stuff, I'll slowly refactor what we need. So in this case, I want to test when I'm at the ground, and then that's when I want to transition. So right now, because I don't have any ground objects set up, any part of a map going, I'm just going to put it at the bottom of my screen, so I'm always on top of it. So I'm looking at if this dot subject dot position plus position dot y. So we're looking at the y value plus the height. Now, is that something that we even put in there? When we did our display, we hard wrote 50. I'm going to max so the scrolling is all backwards. So let's add for our dynamic creature. Let's just give them all a standard size. Or I'll do a radius. Radius is, let's say, 25. So then this would be this dot size is equal to this dot radius times 2. And then ultimately, if I wanted to do my width and height for my animation, I could say that this dot width equals this dot size, this dot height equals this dot size. I could do my bottom, which is something that I'm going to have update all the time. So this dot bottom is equal to this dot position dot y plus this dot radius. And then I want to update that all the time. So here, I'm going to go down to my update. And I'm going to update that before I'm updating my finite state machine, because that's going to be using whatever state I'm in is going to be looking for that bottom. Okay, so now here I'm looking at this. So instead of me looking at the y plus the radius, because now I just rewrote it. Oops. Let's change how we drew. We're drawing this by this dot size. Okay. We'll make sure that this still runs. I got some errors here for the jump state. So we'll do this dot subject dot bottom. If that is less than the bottom of the canvas, which would be height. If that's true, then I want to go back to my run state. Okay, so we're going to go back to our run state. We're going to say this. Oops. I think I switched my run state around too. When we're in the state is going to be part of that subject. That subject is holding the FSM. Try to to keep everything organized in my head. So if my dynamic creature has that FSM, that's what's going to end up changing that state. So when I'm in the jump state, this is where I want to do it. So this dot subject dot FSM dot, oh, actually, no, I don't need to do that. It's just automatically going to do it. Return new run state. And this we're going to say is not poppable. We're passing in the subject. It's not poppable, but because there is one underneath the previous jump state, it should just jump back to that. Okay, now when that gets called and we exit our jump state, so this will get called the very last thing before we change our new state, that is when we want to reset anything that we have. So in this case, my gravity didn't change, my jump strength didn't change, but my velocity is now different. So I do want to change my velocity back to 0. We'll change the y velocity. Velocity.y is now 0. Okay, and then we need to make sure that we reset our player so he's at the bottom and he's not sinking a little bit. So this dot subject dot position, position dot y is going to be height minus this dot radius. That should give me it. Okay, and then we'll return back to the run state, which the run state we also, because we might be entering in any different position. When we're in the run state, we want to make sure when we enter it that we are properly entering the right position. So we'll start at the top 2. This means it's going to get called twice, but if we're not going directly from the jump state to the run state, it's okay. So this dot subject dot position dot y is going to be equal to height minus this dot subject dot radius. That might have made a mistake there. This dot subject. Okay. So when we go out of the jump state, we're going to go back to the run state. The run state is going to get called the enter first. We'll reset that position, and then we're waiting for a key command. Okay. Ultimately, I'm going to make it so that we're doing kind of a walk, so we'll see. Right now, though, I'm starting my player here. I am actually going to start him down at the bottom. So instead of let's doing width divided by 2, height divided by 2, let's do width divided by, let's just have them towards the left side. So I'm going to do, how about 150? And then we are going to do height minus, and this could be maybe a function that we're actually going to pass after the player is created, height minus 25, because I don't have radius yet. All right. I don't like that there. Okay, so now we're going to see if it works, because there might be some bugs. I don't see anything happening, but I'm seeing base input state, base update state, which means that when we created our player, we never passed in what our default state is. So then when we come to dynamic creature, what are we doing? We're setting the initial state as just that blank state, which is not what we want. So we want to be able to pass in some type of default state, since dynamic creature could be anything. So let's do, we'll pass in a state. We just call it initial state, that make it clear. And then instead of passing in here, we're going to be passing in the initial state. Now when we come to our sketch and we're creating our player, we got one more requirement. We're going to create a new run state, and that requires the subject, which would be this. If I do this, it's not actually going to be the player. It's because I'm not inside the player right now. I'm creating from the sketch. So this is not what I want. I could pass in the player, and I can pass in, and this may give us some issues. We may have to set up the state after we created the player and false for our run state. So let's go ahead and see if that works. Ooh, we crashed it. Cannot read properties of undefined. There it's saying run state enter. So it is getting that, but run state enter, we're on line 8, and that got called from the FSM set initial, line 11, dynamic creature, line 13, and then that got called from line 7 setup. So we're stepping down from where we started. Okay, so something's undefined. So let's go to our sketch in line 7. That is calling from the player. Okay, and then from there, it propagated that error to dynamic creature line 13, which is setting this initial state that we're passing in. Okay, so it's saying that there is some issue with this. Okay, and then when we get that set initial state, dynamic creature at line 13, and then this FSM set initial state, line 11. That error is going through everything right here. Line 11, it doesn't have something because we are missing some pieces. Okay, and then the player run state, which is now getting called, line 8, we don't have a subject. Okay, so that means that when we create the dynamic creature, doing the initial state here is not going to work because we can't pass it in here. So this means that we could create the FSM, but we're not going to be able to pass in a state when we create it, since we got to pass a reference to the thing that we're creating. Okay. So now this is only if we're wanting to define it explicitly instead of defining it manually in code. So we do want to set that initial state, which will set the FSM state, and we can pass it in. So basically, I'm going to kind of do like a wrapper around, so we can call set initial state. I'm going to create a function for the dynamic creature that we can pass in a state inside of this. And this is going to call this right here. Okay, so now I could call the player and it would pass in the state. Okay, so this will work. We've got to take off the initial state here because we don't need it. All right, so then that means my dynamic creature, when I create my player, I'm not creating this here. Okay, I'm going to create that outside of my player, but right after the player. So player set initial state. Now this will call the finite state machine and set the initial state. So then I can pass in this state here. So I can say new run state, and I'm going to pass in the player. The player has already been created here. Okay, so now I'm just adding to the player is the subject, and it is not poppable. Let's run, and we got a different error. Initial state is not defined. Where are we at? Set initial state dynamic creature, line 18. Yeah, because it's not initial state there. It's called state. I'm passing in this. There we go. I am the player. We're in the run state. Now if I press the space bar, we've got to make sure that we're transitioning correctly. But we had the run state working. This .current state is not a function. Where is it saying that? Let's see. Line 28. Oops, that's not supposed to be that. That's supposed to be get current state. And that's something that we were not able to figure out these errors until we actually have to start plugging this in. Okay, we're in the run state. I click on the canvas. I'm hitting the space bar. Now we jumped. So look, we're doing the jump state exit. We're running. So let's just stop. We're going to have to tweak this, but that was all happening automatically. So the run state we entered when we pressed jump. So we were here, we pressed jump, we exited the run state, then we entered the jump state, we should have been calling the update. Then we exited the jump state, we entered the run state. Okay. So there's something that we got to tweak in there, but now we have the states where they're kind of going through. So let's test out. What we need to do is we're going to need to apply some force. So we applied force for the subject. I think we have this subject and force. Okay, so let's comment out this, and we're going to start stepping through. So .log hit ground. Let's see it happen again. There we go. We just didn't stop there. So this fired right when we hit the ground. Is that firing right? Okay, so we're hitting the ground, so that means we're going to our run state. Now let's check our run state. We're going from our run state. We're entering height minus this dot subject dot radius. But when we run that, it's setting us up weird. Subject dot position dot y, and how are we exiting? Height minus this dot subject dot radius. In our run state, we're doing subject.y equals height. All right, let's comment out one of these just to make sure. Oops. And when we're going from our player, commenting this back, we know that did let us jump. So that's wigging out right there. So it looks like when we're going back into the run state is the issue. Why would it be doing that? This is the part that's difficult with doing FSM, is that getting everything working together takes a bit of work. Okay, so that was not the issue that was hurting it. We did see when we jumped, this key code, that's where our issue is. Let's look at what the key code is. Our key code never changed. It's still 32. As soon as I stop it, then it goes away. So that is where our error is. Okay, so we want to do key code is 32 and key is pressed. Let's check that now. So we're making sure that it's doing it when the key is pressed. That force and that gravity seems pretty hard. So on our jump state, let's tweak those values. So maybe I don't want to have 2, maybe I want to have 1. Let's take the gravity down. That seems like something's getting tweaked on that. Let's increase our force. I can hold it right now because it's moving so quick. Handle input, add force, this dot gravity. We will check what our velocity is. This dot console.log, this dot subject dot velocity. Let's see what our velocity is. Okay. And this is where stuff will also start going slower if we don't start getting rid of our console.log. So we want to limit what we're trying to do for each one of those. So if I don't specifically need it, I'm going to start removing them. Okay, so we got pressing the space bar, key is pressed. We could also put, if we're wanting to do a ground flag, but we really shouldn't need it. Vector. We're still running, hold on. Now let's look up run state exit, jump state enter, R, Y, here, -24. That's pressing really hard. So that means our velocity is pressing really hard. So let's look. When we exit out, I want to make sure that I have no more velocity. I need to remove my other one. Let's play around with the strength here. Let's do really big. It's doing it. It's firing really hard. 0.5. So something's firing quick. Gravity is a vector. Jump strength is a vector. If we comment this out, that goes right up. And that's not decreasing fast enough. So it's not that. We got something else going on. That looks right. Just that subject, that bottom. This dot radius is the bottom. This dot FSM dot update. And I feel like this is the error right here. If we're in the jump state, let's do this manually to make sure that we're not doing something wrong. This dot subject dot position dot y, if that is, ooh, that's backwards. All right, let's put that back. Clear. Jump state. If the bottom is greater than the height, then we're returning that. And we're resetting. That's why. There we go. So there is now let's put up the gravity really high just so we can see. So I'm going to do this like 35 on my jump strength. Now we're going to test double jump. I'm pressing a whole bunch of times and it won't let me jump again until I'm on the ground. So now if I do animations and I'm passing in for the player animation is only going to play, I can choose when we enter each state, we can change the animation. So this makes it really, really easy for us to do that. Okay, so this is part 2. This kind of finishes it. We figured out issues. It does take a little bit to get this set up properly and find out where you might have errors, but we want to find out what is happening. So we do want to see that we're exiting our jump state, we're entering our run state. Now, the thing that we commented out before about resetting our player position, let's put that back. So we're exiting for the player. And when we enter and when we exit. We reset. I don't need this anymore. I'll just comment it out. Okay, so that's pretty good for our first 2 states. So now we can start plugging in animations and getting that to look good so that it will be consistent. All right?